Yeah, I grew up in a suburb of St. Paul. Um, Grant Hart was from South St. Paul. Bob Mull started, college at McAllister College, coming in from Malone, New York, and we all met in St. Paul. And yeah, so pretty much a lifelong Minnesotan.
I've always had this thing. I'm from California originally, and I live in New York State now. And I always have this thing where I travel around where I kind of, consider what it might be like to live somewhere else, to fantasize about it a little bit. Was that ever something that at any point that you had considered moving around and just trying something else out?
Yeah, I mean, I would live in London, England in a heartbeat. New York City is always, is another city that I think I could live in. There's other places that you travel to that would be like, oh, this would be kind of cool, like places like Flagstaff, Arizona, or up in the mountains. Fort Collins, Colorado, is another cool spot. But yeah, for the most part, I really enjoy Minnesota. It's a great state to live in. It's only a couple hours up to Lake Superior to the North Shore, so uh, it's a good spot.
Do you spend a lot of time at the lake?
I try to get up there a couple of times a year. Superior is a pretty incredible body of water. Red Wing, Minnesota is right on the Mississippi River, and it's at um, an area called Lake Pepin where it widens out to about 3 miles wide, and it goes about 20 miles. Um, Another, probably the second most beautiful part of the state after the North Shore.
Are you a fisher, a boater, just a sitter by the water?
I just like to sit and look at the water.
Yeah, that's completely fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned Flagstaff and Fort Collins, and I'm wondering why those two kind of jump out at you.
Uh, well, I had an opportunity to spend some time in Flagstaff a couple of years ago. I was uh, dating a woman that was from there, and it's just a really beautiful spot. But it's kind of a sleepy town. It's up in the mountains. Fort Collins, Colorado. My friend John Snodgrass lives there. Bill Stevenson lives there. That's where the blasting room is. So I know a lot of people in that area, and it's just kind of a cool town.
Although I guess this maybe isn't the case as much anymore. It seems like for much of Ultrabomb's career that the band has been pretty spread out geographically. Though I suppose that maybe has changed with the most recent lineup.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the original lineup was Jamie Oliver, not the chef, the drummer. He lives in London.
Only one chef per band, right?
Right. And Finney McConnell lives in Toronto. So, I mean, the first, when the band got together, we were in three different countries and three different time zones. And, with a 6 hour difference between Jamie and I. And it was just really kind of made it difficult to coordinate, even just getting on a group call to talk about business. Uh, we replaced Jamie with Derek O'Brien. Derek lives in just outside of Long Beach in Southern California. So, and then Faye stepped away, and Ryan Smith joined the band. Ryan lives in St. Paul. He's been the lead guitar player for Soul Asylum for, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years, something like that. So now we've got two people in St. Paul and one person basically in LA. So it's only two time zones. And oh, sorry, that's my dog, Jackson. Two-hour difference is a lot easier to coordinate and get things going.
Does that change the dynamic of the band itself, or I guess the nature of the songs or the songwriting when two of you can actually meet up in person?
It helps a lot. Yeah, for sure. The first two Ultrabomb albums, essentially we wrote all of the music in the first couple of days in the studio, and then kind of layered the lyrics on top. This new album, I was able to send Ryan the lyrics. He was able to, kind of ruminate on those, come up with uh, a musical idea, send it back to Derek and I, and the songs were fully constructed and realized before we hit the studio. So it was really a joy working that way, and also working with John Fields was an absolute pleasure.
I suspect it also helps, just in terms of just cohesion as a band, just in general. I mean, it must have been really difficult in the early days, just getting things off of the ground and learning to work and play together when you guys were so spread out.
Yeah, and also, the first lineup was we were kind of dysfunctional too. So, just try, yeah, just trying to coordinate things. We tried to put that first record out ourselves, which was, a big mistake, and definitely a humbling learning experience. We're not a record company. We're a punk rock band. So leave that to the people that know what they're doing. Uh, this new album and the last album, Dying to Smile, DC Jam Records put out, and I've known Darren Heeman for quite some time. He put out an EP for a band that I was in prior to Ultrabomb called Porcupine, and so I've known him for a long time. He's a great guy and really honest, record label guy. So he's great to work with.
Now, initially, did you assume? Because I obviously, like, this is a conversation that I've had with a lot of people over the years. I suspect that you've had this with a lot of people over the years. That obviously the dynamics have changed, the music industry has changed, technology has changed things. That maybe it's become a little easier to put out your own records or to support yourself. Was that kind of at least the conversation going into things initially?
When Finn and Jamie and I got together, it was first off, it's I met those guys literally in the studio for the first time in person, and the record that we recorded, "Time to Burn," we were like, "Holy crap! You just wrote a punk rock classic," and initially I flew to Berlin just to see if this was even going to be a thing, because I'd never met him in person. Uh, then getting back out on the road, definitely it's, dealing with clubs and promoters now, and the way that you need to, work all your socials to market it. It's, a huge difference from the DIY years, and back in the 80s when Husker started out. Literally it was like the Wild West. You would just jump in the van, and you'd have your road atlas and a notebook full of phone numbers, and you'd find a payphone and call up somebody and go, "Hey, here, you can put on a show," and it was definitely a different time. Also though, one of you would show up at those shows and everybody would be there, because that's what they did. They'd hang out at their record stores, they'd hear stuff, there's shows coming to town, everybody would go and support it. Nowadays it's, if you don't capture somebody's attention in the first 3 seconds of a song, they swipe on to the next thing. So it's definitely a really different dynamic. And now you've got all these larger, um, promotion groups and promoters, and just trying to get yourself known. And you're we work with Atomic Music Group. James McLean out of the Toronto office, he's the president of Atomic Music Canada, uh, which is just kind of a coincidence. With you know didn't really have anything to do with Finney living in Toronto, but it's one of those things where it's like, okay, we're pitching you for direct support slots. We're trying to book shows, and promoters and clubs are like, well, they don't have any metadata. We don't know how many tickets they can sell. It's like it's a catch 22. So trying to establish the act and get people to follow us and listen to us and then buy tickets is like the hardest thing.
And I think when you're first starting out, especially when you're younger, there's a power in not having any expectations going into it. Obviously, there's a power in just being sort of younger and being able to spend a lot of your time doing it. Being a little bit easier to sleep on floors and make sacrifices. Right. But in this case, all of a sudden, in some senses, you are starting out from scratch in that, this is, that it was a new band name. Obviously, people would recognize your name, but also you're also still starting out with a certain, obviously, like you wouldn't, you don't want to be playing to like 2 to 3 people when you start out. You don't want to be starting out from scratch in the same way that you were when you were like 15.
Right. It would be really great if just the fact that I was in Husker would get people to buy tickets, but promoters don't give a shit about bands that feature members formerly of something else. It's establishing the new act and the new band, and we're not a nostalgia act anyway. It's like we're making music that I think is fresh and of the moment. Uh, after Finney left the band and Ryan joined, I mean, I did consider changing the name Ultrabomb, but I've got a lot personally invested in this band and in this band name, and I ultimately I just decided to keep it as Ultrabomb and just move on with 2 new guys. Because it would have been going back to uh, step one, establishing a new act, getting people to go like, oh, okay, that's who those guys are.
Yeah, you've got all that metadata stored up. You need to use it.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it is a difficult decision, especially in the case where when it's two-thirds of the band, because you did start this band with the 2 other guys. Is that a decision that you still like have to, or is that a conversation that you still have to have with them even as they're leaving, that like, oh, like I'm still going to carry this thing on in some way?
Well, when Finney decided to step away, he told me that the band is his Ultrabomb is his gift to me. He at one point said, because it was Finney that contacted Jamie and I to start the band in the first place. And he later told me, it's like, well, I wanted to start this for a showcase for me. He felt that I just had kind of been treated unfairly by other bands that I had been in prior, and he wanted it to be a good vehicle for me to get my music out there, get my lyrics out there. So Finney wrote the music for on the first couple of albums. Jamie wrote the music for Superhero Shit on the first record, and he wrote the lyrics and music. Actually played all the instruments on West in the Summertime on Dying to Smile. And all the other lyrics are mine. So I'm definitely grateful that I was able to see those lyrics come to life and in songs that I thought were absolute bangers. Working with Ryan and Derek, it's a little bit more of a collaboration on the musical side now. Maybe just because it's easier with Ryan and I being in the same time zone it's basically the same area code. And uh, when I send Ryan lyrics, I also give him, the uh, if he wants to edit a line or change something a little bit just to make it flow better, I don't have a problem with that. Um, and once the three of us get together, then it's like we're really hammering out the arrangements and getting it tight and knowing where all the verses go, all the choruses go, where the bridge is. Uh, it's just a lot easier now.
Yeah, and it sounds like that it it's inspired the naming somewhere that it has to be a different thing. That it's going to be a different thing. That it's going to sound different just by the nature of the way that the songs are created. That it's not just writing and controlling everything.
Right. I do think the new record, yeah, still sounds like Ultrabomb, but it's uh, I think musically now we're able to maybe take a few more chances stylistically with some songs where um, I'm not knocking Finney's songwriting. He's got a great ear. He's a good composer. But he has a formula that he likes to kind of stick to, and uh,
I mean, so did the Ramones, but it worked out fine for them. I mean, there's
well,
nothing
that's
wrong with
true.
that.
That's true. Yep. I think Ryan's just a little bit more willing to take a chance on
Yeah.
something that's going to be a little bit different. And I love the diversity of the songs on the new album, but I also think the album flows really well from song to song. It doesn't sound like um, a bunch of different bands. It sounds like one band all the way through. And I couldn't be happier with this record. Actually, I think it's one of the best records I've ever been a part of. So.
That's an extremely high bar. And you had said earlier that the songs were that you were not a nostalgia act and the songs were of the moment. And I'm curious what you meant by that.
The majority of the lyrics for the new record were written last year, last summer, and leading up to our you know uh, the recording session. So just kind of being mindful of what's happening in the world, what's happening here in the U.S. with our current administration. I mean, it's not overtly political. We're not. I I haven't wrote a fuck Trump song yet, but but it still could be one coming. You never know. Uh, but just kind of just trying to start a conversation, keep the conversation going. Get people to be more aware of what's going on in their communities, what they can do to help. Being apolitical that's picking a side. Uh, I think it's really important right now that people are um, stand up and say something. It's not the time to be a bystander. It's time to be an upstander.
And you got to something there that I've been I was in the city. I was in Queens for the last like 20 years, and I moved up north to the Hudson Valley. And so I've been having a different. Obviously, like my it's a different area, it's a different community, and I've been thinking a lot about communities in different ways, and I think that maybe is a piece of certainly some of the songs in the record. What it means to interact with people in person, especially in this era, and um, something that I've been thinking about a lot is how much of this current moment is really a is fallout from us being so isolated from one another, like even prior to the pandemic.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It I think too many people don't get involved with those because all of a sudden it's inconvenient to them to or makes them uncomfortable. But everything that's going on right now, you should be uncomfortable about. It's everybody likes to do their one-click shopping and get it delivered the next day, and uh, they don't realize that the economic power that they have. It's like, if we all stand up and we all say no, first off, the people in the top 0.001% who hoard all the wealth, all of a sudden they'll be like, hey, wait a second, how come you know, why are our sales numbers dropping? And that would probably all of a sudden turn into political pressure through lobby groups on the government. But uh, we do have the power to fight this, um, even if it isn't inconvenient or makes you uncomfortable. We have to do something.
I was looking through some of the press releases that Mike had sent out around the different singles, and there was a quote from one of the songs. A quote from you about one of the songs, and I was reading, and I was thinking, oh, wait, is he saying that he doesn't want to be political? It was about look forward in anger, and it says it's a commentary on how partisan politics push to divide us when we should all be coming together. And I was like, oh, is this him? Is this him saying like that like maybe we shouldn't be engaging in politics? But it sounds like you're saying quite the opposite, that people in fact like should be engaged in politics. And I guess it can that be difficult to reconcile, to have people actively engaged in politics without us being too divided from one another?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean that was the whole point. It's the country is so polarized right now. The far left and the far right are so far apart, and you've got nothing but gridlock in governments, from local governments to state houses to to Congress, and nothing's getting done. People aren't being taken care of. Safety nets like disappearing, and people that they have people thinking like, oh well, it's your fault because you think this way, or uh, I mean they have us fighting culture wars when we should be fighting the class war, right? Uh, and mainstream media definitely does not help. The way they choose to phrase stories or headlines, or the words that they use describing something, it it certainly doesn't help. It's not bringing people together, and that's the thing. It's like we should be getting together in our communities and uh, you know getting to know people again and having those conversations, and without it devolving into name calling, and just so we can get to a point where stuff actually starts to happen again, but for the benefit of all of our communities.
You've been through it too. You've had some major health issues. Your sister had some major health issues. I think you totaled your car at one point too. Like,
yeah, my sister actually passed away about a year ago. She had leukemia, and she lost that battle, which was very sad. She was like uh, my lifelong best friend and champion. Uh, my prostate cancer, as far as I know, everything is fine. I had my prostate removed in almost 3 years ago now. Actually, coming up on 4 years. But it's getting diagnosed with cancer is, in a way, it turns into a superpower kind of at first you're like, oh fuck, I have cancer, and then it's like, oh shit, I have cancer. I've got to, I need to like get a lot of shit together here. Uh, the car thing was, that sucked, but
Yeah, not the end of the world.
but I survived. Uh, and I believe I'm good, and I hope I'm good, but I'm also, don't have health insurance because I live in America, you know, and uh, I'm turned 67 back in March, and I am collecting Social Security now, and so I have Medicare, but I can't afford like the fancy Medicare, so I just have the basic. Like if I ended up in an emergency room, I would probably only end up being charged a few $1,000s. But just going in for a checkup is still a few $100 because not everything is covered by Medicare. Uh, you look at all the money the government spends on the military industrial complex and these ongoing uh, you know wars of choice, and the fact that they're cutting benefits. We don't have universal health care. They're cutting food assistance and housing assistance, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I want to get back to this idea of the superpower. I mean, what when you were dealing with that and you were looking at your life and you were looking at the things that you really needed to, I guess, address, what were those aspects?
Well, kind of, initially, you do sort of start to get all of your affairs in order and stuff like that. But it's like, okay, life is short. I don't want to, work in manufacturing and until I keel over in the factory and then just get replaced like the next week. Uh, it really kind of drove home the point that I love music. I love punk rock, and I'm good at it, and I want to keep doing this and keep writing new music and getting out and playing shows. And there's no excuse for me not to anymore. It's like that's how I want to go out. I want to go out doing what I want to do and living my life the way that it brings me joy and makes me happy.
I kind of like offhandedly, made the chef reference, but like you ran a restaurant for a while, right? Was that
Yeah,
was that also a passion?
it was. Yeah. After Husker Du broke up, I kind of gravitated back to the restaurant world. Met a guy named Lenny Russo, who was the
To be clear, so that's what you were doing prior to music, and then the band took off,
yeah,
and you got back into it.
in the early Husker years, I waited tables as as my job in between tours. I was lucky enough to work for a small Italian restaurant in St. Paul, run by the this family, and they were totally cool with giving me a month or 2 months off to go out on tour. So after the band broke up, I ended up waiting tables again, and met Lenny Russo. Lenny is uh, Lenny became one of the top chefs in the Twin Cities. Was nominated for numerous James Beard awards for best chef Midwest, always losing out to somebody either in Chicago or Kansas City. Uh, but he and I became really good friends, and he talked me into the back of the house, and then started to mentor me and teach me how to cook. And he's like, "You've got a really good palate. You've got a good sense for this." Uh, so all of a sudden, I became a chef. And uh, after a few years of working my way up the line, and I remember, my first job as where I was the actual chef, and kept thinking like, oh, I'm just a little baby chef. I'm not a real chef, and there's definitely some, imposter syndrome, but it, ended up being a 20-year career, and ended up owning my own place, and the restaurants that I ran or owned, uh, got a lot of good accolades and reviews, and uh, it was definitely a passion. But I went 14 years without even picking up a bass, which is crazy. And when I finally got back to playing music, then I realized how much really that was a bigger part of who I am, and uh, something that feeds me, uh, and how much I missed it. And to be quite honest, I don't miss working in restaurants at all. uh, the hours, the stress. The only, I miss those relationships that you have with your coworkers, and with your regular customers. But I'm much happier toiling away trying to be a punk rock bass player and not starve or get unhoused. And actually, it's kind of crazy. I'm okay with touring now. If I have to sleep on a floor, I'm all right with it. Because I get up and jump up on stage and play music and make people happy.
Did you feel like, in order to focus on that, in order to focus on being a chef, in order to focus on running a restaurant, that you needed to just kind of cold turkey cut music out altogether?
It wasn't intentional, but it just got to a point where, uh, you're working 60-hour weeks, and 12 to 14-hour days, and you're just tired. And I just kind of, didn't. I wasn't like, oh, I can't play the bass anymore. It just happened, and then it's one of those things where all of a sudden it's like, oh, holy crap, I haven't played the bass in 14 years. So
Yeah, life is weird like that, right? I mean,
yeah,
you're so focused on what you're doing at the moment that you have to compartmentalize, I think, in order to just sort of like go through life sometimes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I also, I love the Japanese philosophy of Ichigo Ichie, which is, one moment, one time. Essentially, this moment will never happen again. So embrace it, live in it. Realize what you have in your life at that moment, and what's around you, instead of thinking like, oh, I need to do this, and if I get this, then this will be better, and if I get to this thing, then that's going to make my life great. It's like, um, realize that your life is great right now, and enjoy it.
Do you think that you could have been happy, led a reasonably happy existence, just continuing on being a chef, doing the restaurant thing?
By the time I got out of it, I think I was definitely approaching burnout. So, um, yeah, uh, getting out of that was a bit of a relief. Um, but I sold wine for, you know, uh, about a dozen years, and that was interesting. You know, uh, I had built up uh, a pretty good wine list at the restaurants that I um, ran, and I was the wine buyer. And really, that was also one of those things where all of a sudden I had a passion for it and learned a lot about it. Once I started selling wine, I got my first level some pin. Uh, it's kind of crazy is how much I know about wine, and I usually don't talk about it. But usually, like, if I do, it's one of those things where I'll just rattle off a bunch of stuff and then go like, oh, holy shit, I guess I do know a lot about this. I wasn't necessarily the greatest sales guy though, because it's a hustle, and the guys that are really good at it, they're just natural salespeople. They can, it doesn't matter what they're selling. The fact that I had a good palate and knew a lot about wine, um, definitely, there were a handful of shops that I did really well at, but you'd go into bigger chains, and the managers don't give a shit. They don't know anything about wine. They just want to know how cheap can they get it. So uh, you deal with a lot of rejection, and and you know during those sales years, that was probably not really great for my mental health. Um, Constantly hearing no, and but I traveled to Italy and to Spain and to California a few times on some really cool trips, and got to uh, taste some really amazing wines. So that part was fun. Um, I like to joke that my closing line here in Minnesota was like, they'd taste the wine and it'd be like, yeah, it's not too bad. A guy could choke it down if he had to.
It's also a great party trick, and I'm assuming great on like first dates, just the kind of thing to whip out.
Uh, no, not really.
No, okay.
Although last September, I had a cool experience on the road. I was playing with John Snodgrass and David Yarstrom. We're doing a buddies tour where we're playing all Husker tunes, but we played in Sacramento with the Swingin' Utters, and went to, John had a friend that was putting us up, and when we got to their house, I see this bottle of this wine. It's Robert Bialy is a California winemaker. He's uh, he makes a Zinfandel called the Black Chicken, which is kind of one of those iconic California Zins. And I'm like, oh wow, you got a Black Chicken here, and all of a sudden this the boyfriend of one of the friends goes, oh yeah, I made that wine, and I'm like, wait, what? And he's like, "Oh yeah, I used to work at Bialy, and I made that was actually the last vintage, and we were just stopping at a store, and I saw it, so I grabbed it." So, uh, and he goes, "Yeah, I left Bialy, and then I went to work for Ridge. Ridge Vineyards Ridge is an icon in California, particularly with Zinfandel, but um, their flagship wine is called Montebello, which is where one of the facilities is." He's like, yeah, I actually went to work at Ridge, and I, got to make wines at Montebello. And he's like, yeah, the Chardonnay, the estate Chardonnay I just made got 100 points. And I'm like, holy shit. So the guy's name is Tress Getting, and when we opened up that bottle of Black Chicken, I was able to enjoy a kick-ass bottle of wine with the winemaker, not only satisfy my rock and roll, punk rock, side, but also like my wine geek side. And that was a really cool experience.
Is that like pulling out a copy of like Pet Sounds and the guy goes, "Oh, I played on that."
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. Yeah. It's like, oh, yeah, I was in the wrecking crew. What? Yeah.
I've had definitely had points in my life where I think that I've reached it. Is that something that you've reached at all in music?
Uh, no, not really. You know, I think punk rock keeps me young. Punk rock has saved my life a couple of times,
Yeah.
and uh, playing. I've had an opportunity to play with a lot of really great players over the years. Some jazz icons in like the avant-garde world. Local guy Charlie Parr. I've done some stuff with him. It being able to get out there and play something different and to challenge yourself, it's definitely is far from burnout. Um, yeah, I mean it's I thrive on touring. It actually gets me pretty energized to start a tour. And tours are always just a mind bender anyway. It's, you start a 3 week tour and 5 days into it, and you're like, wow, it seems like that first show we played was such a long time ago. And by the time you're at the end of the tour, it's just crazy how your sense of time is totally gets warped. And also every tour you know, developed its own language. You start little inside jokes, little things, and it's just a lot of fun.